This is a really exciting conversation for me because Peter doesn't know this, but I'm actually a vegetarian. So this is very helpful, and I have been my whole life. So this is
nice.
An extra special conversation. I'd like to think the organizers knew that about me and thought accordingly.
Yeah.
So you were here on a world tour with some government leaders.
Sure.
You're doing a little bit of marketing. You are getting a little bit of the London culture in.
Sure.
So naturally you're came to
and
see
the weather.
me. And the weather, famously.
London in the sun, right? There's no greater city.
You know what? That's true. That is true, though. You just missed the heat wave. That's the best part of the summers here. Talk to us a little bit about how you approach the Impossible Foods brand in this part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we're a US-based company. We're the fastest growing plant-based company in the world. And that's not, a victory lap here because it's not a secret that the category is kind of shrinking. Right, it started with a big bang, and there was a lot of publicity around it and several huge high-profile IPOs. And it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and investors poured money into it. And it's kind of correcting itself a little bit, and it's kind of contracting a little bit at the same time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's kind of flooded. There's in the U.S. you just look at there's 200 plant-based brands for a $2 billion market. There's just too many. It's confusing to consumers. A lot of them don't taste good. I think it was mismarketed in the beginning. Founders were climate zealots. They marketed as a climate burger. They were against the cattle industry, against farming. It was against and not for, and created bifurcation. It became a partisan issue, became political, became polarizing. I could come up with more P's probably. Oh, processed. Here's another one, segue. And then the meat industry kind of got nervous that we had traction, and they started slandering this industry and calling us processed. And they've called us a lot of things, but that one stuck, right? And you look at the ingredient label, and it's got a long ingredient label because you're mirroring and mimicking animal meat, which is not hard, which is not easy to do. And it's all plant-based ingredients, but it's a long list. And in the UK, under 50% of the grocery stores processed, but almost half, right? And no one really cares. In the US, it's 75% of the entire grocery store is processed. But for whatever reason, that's hurt the industry too. And we have not done a good job refuting that. We're a nutrient-dense food. We don't have artificial colors like Red 47. We don't have artificial sweeteners like sucralose. So the MAHA movement, MAGA, whatever movement you're talking, it doesn't really go after us, but that hurt us. So now here we are, we want to launch into the UK, which is a leading market in the entire world for plant-based, right? So the UK is leading, not lagging, in terms of per capita consumption and openness to plant-based options, which is an unbelievable opportunity for everybody, right? And so here we are, this is a beacon of what plant-based could be. The market in the UK now is starting to plateau because consumers are complaining the food doesn't taste as good as it should. And it's a warm beer, cold shower solution. It's a compromise to my animal burger. And so we're trying to put better options in the market to stimulate demand and consumption. And we have the best, of course I'm biased, but it is proven independently, we have the best tasting products. So we're talking to customers and big distributors, and there's a lot of pent-up demand for our products. And consumers as well, and we think us getting here and investing in this market is good for commerce, it's good for the UK economy, it's good for the consumer, and it's good for the planet. And we're kind of just patiently waiting to get regulatory approval, which has been, a bit of a long process. And so here we are.
So here you are. You hit on a couple of things there, and we're going to dive into it. But while we do that, I just want to get a polling question on the screen if we can, because it really touches on some of the points that Peter just made. It'll show up in just a moment, but if you want to get your phones out, scan the QR code. It should be over there. It says, has your organization shifted its consumer messaging away from sustainability? Now, while you guys put in your answers, I want to pose that question to you, because you used a couple of words there, processed, et cetera. Your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think we've shifted the emphasis away from sustainability. And I think, kind of marketing 101 is you take yourself out of the equation, right? So personally, I think we should lead with sustainability, but it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And there's not enough people, and that's why it's important to have conferences like this. There's not enough people in the world that care about climate right now. And that needs to change, and people need to be educated and more open. And we're an inherently sustainable company, right? So 50 million pounds of impossible plant-based meat versus 50 million pounds of animal meat, saves 4.5 billion gallons of water. I think it's 37 million trees and avoids 1.5 billion pounds of GHG, carbon. So, and there's obviously, I flew over here and I saw this whole thing on BA's sustainability commitment, and they want to be carbon neutral in 20 years. Now, that's not an inherently sustainable company for the environment, but they know they need to do it. So leading with climate didn't work selling food. People thought it was not going to taste good, and then it became political and woke, and that's how the industry was founded. So now we're pivoting, because it is food, and people eat food for taste, and people eat food for nutrition. So ours is delicious and nutritious food, right? It's got 22 grams of protein, 9 amino acids, 0 cholesterol, 0. It's got fiber. There's no fiber found in animal meat, and it's got 50% less saturated fat, so it's nutrient dense. It's anything but processed. And so if it tastes good and it's good for you, that's the broadest way you can appeal to people. Now, if you're interested, we can go third decimal point on animal welfare and water savings and tree savings and GHG and everything there is to know about climate. But it's not the way to lead the marketing of this product, to make it as broad as possible. In the end of the day, chicken, beef, pork, animal is $1.4 trillion addressable market, one of the largest addressable markets in the world. And plant-based is 10 billion. So we're not winning. Plant-based is flat to down. Animal consumption's up 10 to 12%. So we got to figure out how to communicate this in a way. And we insulted meat eaters in the beginning by being anti-cattle and anti-anti, instead of inviting meat eaters. And the last thing I'll say here is, I don't want to displace vegetarian brands. I could, with our taste, we're the best tasting plant-based option out there. I could easily steal more share and get a bigger slice of a shrinking pie against other plant-based. But that's not advancing sustainability in the mission. The only way it works is if people are substituting animal products for plant-based products. That's how you're saving animals, water, trees, and avoiding GHG. So we got to figure out how to appeal. I'm saying flexitarians, which are people that are open to eating meat. They're meat eaters, but they're open to eating plant-based meat, is what I meant to say. There's a whole host of meat eaters that are immovable, and we can't afford to target them right now. But there's a huge swath of the population. Our guesstimate is about a third of the population, which is a massive opportunity, where they're eating meat, but degrees of meat. Some are eating meat with a bunch of plant-based, some are eating meat with a little bit of plant-based. So that's what we need to do, and we need to invite them to try our products, and don't preach to them, don't judge them, don't insult them. So we have work to do.
Well, your approach is in the minority, according to this poll, talking about...
I'm at a sustainability conference. I should hope so.
Well, that's fair. So the poll came in about 65% saying no, they're not shifting it away. About 35% saying yes. I think it's interesting, though, Peter, because a lot of the elements that you talked about in terms of the marketing, making it politicized, making it not really kind of alienating some of the meat eaters, for example, those are American political conversations. What has been your experience in Europe, where there is perhaps a little bit more climate consciousness on both sides of the political spectrum?
Sure, and I don't mean that we're walking away. It's still proud on our packaging. What I meant is the broad marketing efforts, upper funnel, right? What is the communication that resonates to the most people, right? And it's delicious, nutritious food. It's food, right? So it's still on our pack. It's on our website. It's just not in broad-based advertising and things like that. So the reality is the EU and the UK, far ahead of many other cultures and continents in terms of openness to sustainability. And that's why the per capita consumption in the UK is higher. And that's why the per capita consumption in the EU is even higher than the US. So you guys are leading, others are lagging, and the thing about when you launch a global brand, when we get into the UK, we will adjust our messaging based on the cultural fit. So I wasn't saying that was sacrosanct and immovable. No, I don't want to market impossible in the UK just like we market in the US. It's a different, there's nuances, and I think you have to address that as an adept marketer. But to the degree that you guys can continue to lead is a great thing, because the world needs to catch up in terms of openness and practice. right? We have two problems in America in a lot of ways: openness and then practice. And you can't practice unless you're open. So.
What does that look like? I mean, openness and practice in Europe. What's the lesson there? What are they doing? What's Europe doing right in terms of that's adoptable by Americans?
Well, look, I think there's just a general openness to environmental issues versus America, but also to food. I mean, you have half the processed food in the EU and the UK as you do in America, right? Food's made better, right? You refrigerate food. You have more fresh food than frozen. Right? So the whole approach to the planet is systemically different than other continents, which is a beautiful thing. And it's been slower to catch on. So, you guys are enlightened. So.
Yeah, there's no lean cuisines here. That doesn't exist. But a good reason for that, though, is the way food is regulated here. It's been a real issue.
Without a doubt.
It's been a real issue in terms of things like trade, for example, with the United States and getting even American farming goods into this part of the world. What has been your experience?
I mean, if you go to
that?
France or Italy, they don't allow soda in schools. The government just says no. Now,
I don't know how they live without Dr. Pepper.
But I'm just saying, is that overreaching or is that just common sense, right? So you're starting eating habits in a much better way much earlier. Mm-hmm. And that is, I'm not going to get into debate on government intervention, but that is regulation, right? They're saying that we need healthier foods for our children in schools. And that is coming from the government, which is informing food choice in schools at a very, very young age, right? That does not happen in the US. I mean, there's a lot of bad habits starting very early in life. So, it's not, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy what's happening here, right? And, it's not luck, it's design. And I think that's good. I think if the government is going to intervene or regulate or guide, it should be on very important issues such as health, whether it be personal health or planet health.
What has your regulatory experience been for Impossible Foods specifically?
Here? Mm-hmm. On the slow side, which, by the way, that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, I just sat there and told everyone that when it comes to food and the health of people and the planet, the government should have a keen interest in that. That's one side. The flip side of that is, we've been trying for 4 years to get Impossible in the UK, and we're still not there yet. But we're waiting kind of patiently to get that done. And there's a path. It's been approved everywhere else, and we're actually ahead in the EU than we are in the UK with the same application, which is kind of interesting. But we'll get there, but it's been slow. And we're ready to invest in this market. We're ready to give consumers better choices. And we're kind of gated because of the regulation. And so regulation's a good thing and a bad thing. At some point, when years and years go by, it's enough.
Have you, just in your travels when it comes to things approaching marketing, but also the regulatory approval, are you seeing a difference between how you approach clients, companies, stores, et cetera, in the UK versus Europe, or is that all kind of one
I think it's all intertwined. I mean, I think, look, we've met with very large customers here, Tesco and Waitrose and Sainsbury's, and they all want our product because they want to expand their category, right? And they're starting to see trends where the consumption's going down because consumer wants better tasting food. So they would love our products here, and that's both commerce, and that's also both giving consumer choices, which is what they want to do when it comes to food. And also, there's been tremendous food inflation in the UK, right? And I think within that, animal beef, is driving a ton of inflation. So actually having a plant-based beef product that has equal the protein delivery and zero cholesterol for the same or less cost, I think is a good option for consumers as well at this point. So there's a lot of reasons why this makes sense.
So there was an era not too long ago, I'm not sure how strong this is, but an era not too long ago when inflation in general wasn't as much of a factor into people's thinking, but one where people were willing to pay up for the healthier option. So if you had, an organic offering and a non-organic offering, people would pay a little extra for the organic offering. Are you seeing that behavior maybe change a little bit? Is that affecting your strategy in terms of making a healthy, sustainable option achievable and viable at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a change. I mean, to pay a premium for something that's organic or grass-fed, when everything else is a premium, something has to give.
Yeah.
So you are seeing, right now our product is kind of at parity with grass-fed organic beef, which is an amazing accomplishment because the people eating grass-fed organic beef are open to plant-based. But we are a premium to what I would call the private label base well-ground beef in this saran wrap and the bottom of the thing. We are a premium. And we're trying to drive those costs down because in an ideal world, we would be delicious, nutritious, and accessible and affordable. DNNA, delicious, nutritious, accessible and affordable. So, but we have work to do. Now, part of that is scale, right? And when the market's contracting and we're held up in regulatory, it's hard to scale, right? So that will come down with scale. And like I said, if we get the distribution in the UK that we think we're going to get, and it'll be broad-based, I look at this very reciprocally, right? We would not only invest in people and advertising and marketing, but we would probably invest in local manufacturing, which again would drive costs down from a freight perspective and better for the planet perspective because you're shipping and trucking and less miles. So there are ways to take cost out, but right now, plant-based is a premium, right? So of course, that's going to hurt us disproportionately because everything's a premium, right? And people really feel it. Feeling it in the US, but they're really feeling it here. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people in the last 48 hours where grocery prices are a huge issue in the UK.
I think on both sides of the Atlantic, the sensitivity to prices and inflation and costs is enormous. Talk to us a little bit about how quickly you can scale. When you get the green light from whichever governments you need the green light from, how quickly can you scale up?
We're ready. We have manufacturing already identified in the Netherlands, ready to go to do the initial shipments here in the UK and the EU. And like I said, if it takes on like we think it's going to take on, we'll move the UK production to the UK. We can scale immediately. We're ready. We have all the ingredients. The whole supply chain is ready to go.
So outside of regulation, let's put that on the side for a moment. What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about in this kind of marriage of healthy eating and nutrition and affordability and international market?
It's a great question, and it's not what you think. It's not the naysayers that say the category is dead. It's the opportunity that keeps me up at night. And I laugh at the naysayers and the cynics, right? It's easy to be cynical. Oh, the plant-based category is declining, it's over. It hasn't even started. So when I look at plant-based, it's nascent, it's in the beginning. We need to mold and shape it and grow it. And I just look at the data, it's simple. You're talking below 20% household penetration, really across the board around the world. It's higher here, but 80% roughly of the population hasn't had a plant-based option. Now that's a challenge and a massive opportunity, and that's on us to market it right, distribute it right, make it more accessible, communicate it in a different way. When I look at awareness levels of anything, Beyond Meat, corn, Veg Butcher, Impossible, they're all under 20%. That means 80% of the world population has never even heard of these brands. Now you can change that through advertising, communication. When I look at distribution, I'll just give you a stat in the US as an example. Our sales force has done a nice job. We have 1,000 distribution points, 1,200 distribution points in retail grocery, and there's 9,000. So there's so much more distribution to get in terms of making it accessible. If I look at food service, we have under 50,000 distribution points in food service. We're number one in food service in plant-based, but there's 1.4 million locations. So what I say to the cynics is we're in first gear. This category is not dead. It's ready to take off, but it needs good brands, it needs better food, and it needs investment, right? None of the plant-based companies, and I sit on consortiums and plant-based companies, and I've been very vocal about this. You need to invest. I mean, Unilever, Nestle, all these legacy Coca-Cola, all these legacy CPG companies, there's a playbook. You invest in trial and awareness, and it takes money. Problem is a lot of plant-based companies are stretched. They're small, they haven't scaled. Investment's dried up. It's hard to capital raise right now, right? The IPO markets are tough, so they haven't been able to have a liquidity event. So they have debt, low cash, no investment, right? And so that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're not out there on our front foot playing offense. We're playing defense. So this is all fixable, and it's just going to take some time. And by the way, the political nonsense and different changes in administrations, they come and go, right? So, that's not forever. And so plant-based will be, the last thing I'll say is plant-based is here to stay. And there's a variety of reasons, whether you are pro-planet welfare, pro-animal welfare, you're pro-personal health, there's not enough meat to feed the world population. It's here to stay. Where it grows fastest, where the innovation comes from, we can debate that till the cows come home, pun intended. But the fact that it's here to stay is undebatable, right? So it's up to us to push it and market it and expand it.
On that note, just make me a promise that the next time you come into this very sustainable, big Bloomberg building, you'll bring us some samples.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
I would
Mission
get
accomplished.
arrested at Heathrow if I brought some products that were not approved by the FSA.
Well, hopefully
But,
next time you arrive, we'll have crossed that barrier.
But that's a promise.
Done.